Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Pastor Lavelle Jennings here again on the Gazebo Talk. As always, we have a very special guest here today, a lady that's been here many years on this earth and in Idlewild, Michigan. Her name is Sondra Brady. I'm excited to be able to talk with her and hear some history. So stay tuned for that powerful history. And in a few minutes, she's going to introduce herself. And we just thank God for that history. See you soon. Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Sondra Elaine Brady.
Okay. Miss Brady, you don't mind. Mrs. Brady, would you mind me calling you Sondra?
Sondra, that's fine.
Okay. Sondra, how long have you lived in Baldwin?
Actually, I've never lived in Baldwin, I lived in Idlewild.
Idlewild. Thank you for correcting me. Okay.
I was born in Idlewild in 1942.
1942. Okay. What's the difference now? I've always associated Idlewild with Baldwin. What would you say the difference is between those two?
Well, actually, when I was a little girl coming here, we lived here until I was 9, and my mother moved us to Flint, and then we'd come back every summer. But the difference between Idlewild and Baldwin, Yates Township was all black.
Okay.
And Baldwin was all white.
That is wonderful.
Back then, we'd say, colored. But then we were from colored to African American to Negro. We've had so many different names, but all in all, it was still always black.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that because, I've always been taught that, we're not colored, we're black. But you just explained that because it seemed like Ottawa was a different place or just everything was different. So how old are you now?
I'm 80.
80 years old. You're looking good.
Thank you.
Amen. Good. Okay. So what do you remember about, let's go back to Ottawa. You said you were born in here. You had a house out here, or your parents had a house in Ottawa?
Okay. My mother was brought here by my grandmother, Vina Smith, when she was just an infant.
Okay.
And back in the day, you know how Idlewild originated, how Yates came about, is that right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, go explain that.
Okay. Well, back in the day, there were very famous people that came here, but the problem with that was they were not allowed to go to clubs. Once they left Idlewild, we didn't have any clubs to go to. It didn't matter how much money you had. You could work in the clubs, but you weren't allowed to to sit at the tables or socialize. So there were 4 white men out of Chicago that came up with this idea that they should buy property up here and sell it only to the wealthy blacks or middle class blacks. So they would have a place to go and take their families Memorial Day, Labor Day, and all of that. So they got together, they bought property here with the stipulation that they would only sell it to wealthy blacks or middle class blacks. Now, my grandparents were not wealthy, but they came up here to work.
Okay.
My grandmother was a beautician, so she did hair to a lot of the famous stars. My grandfather worked railroads and also helped build homes up here.
In Idlewild?
In Idlewild. That was Idlewild came to be in 1932, I believe it was.
Okay, 1932. Okay, so what about all the black-owned businesses up there? Let's jump right into it. What did they have? What do you remember?
Well, what was so great about this is that Idlewild came up with their own fire department, with their own restaurants, with their own post office. We even had a landline for phones. We took care of, because Baldwin wasn't very welcome to people in Idlewild.
Okay.
You could go there and get Jones ice cream or do some shopping, but they were not friendly to.
It was separate.
It was very separate. In fact, I didn't even know what white people were because we didn't have money. It wasn't like we were driving all over, sightseeing. And the first time I really experienced racism, although it was here, but I didn't know it because Idlewild was so separate.
Yes.
So you didn't feel the racism because you weren't exposed to it. You were exposed to Yates Township, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
You can't feel something that you don't know is there. You know?
All right.
And that's the way Baldwin was. It was just 3 miles from us, but very segregated.
Wow. So what kind of racism did you actually experience, if you experienced any? What?
I didn't up here.
Didn't, none of it?
No, it was a cultural shock for me when I moved to Flint.
Okay.
Because I'd never experienced it because we were never around. I mean, my grandparents, when they shopped, they might went to Baldwin to buy things. But the only thing I remember about Baldwin as a child was the theater. We had a drive-in theater. If you go down, you'll still see that on 37.
Okay.
But we passed through. It wasn't like we We stopped to shop. You left Idlewild. You went to the movies. You went back home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know of any black people in Baldwin though?
No, none. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
You have to remember,
yeah.
I was a little girl.
Yes.
We didn't have cars, and back then, grown-ups didn't talk in front of kids. If they experienced racism and stuff, we didn't know it.
You didn't know it?
No, because they never talked about anything that was adult. You went outside to play. You didn't sit up under grown folks.
Okay.
And so we didn't experience any of that.
Totally different. Totally
Different.
You know, what kind of, now what about the businesses? What all the businesses you remember out here? You know, there was Flamingo.
Oh yeah, I remember the Flamingo. I
Okay.
remember the Glass House.
The Glass House, I heard of that before.
Okay, I remember Letman's Hardware.
Yep, Letman Hardware.
I remember Letman's. She's the one that that had the first. The first souvenir shop. Her name was Lena. Lena. I'll think of her last name. She was out of Chicago.
Okay.
And she opened up the first business, and that's where all the famous people went to get souvenirs. Wow. And her place actually is still on 10. I'm trying to think her name right off. But anyway, I'll come to it. I remember skating ring, Polk skating ring.
Polk skating ring, okay.
I remember Sergeant Johnson.
Now, Sergeant Johnson, refresh my memory on Sergeant Johnson.
Sergeant Johnson was in the military. He was only about 5'3".
Okay.
And he lost his eyesight. And then he opened up Sergeant Johnson's Stables.
Okay.
And
like a horse or horsey and all that? All right.
There, actually, it's right there on Broadway,
Okay.
the house. And he had a wife, I believe her name was Maybelle.
Okay.
And Sergeant had his horses so trained until she drove. She blew the horn once, they would trot.
You remember that?
I remember that. Because that's what we did. We horseback rode, we swim, and roller skate. And he blew it twice. They would gallop 3 times. They'd head back to the stables.
Wow. How much did that cost? Did you remember what the price was? Was it cheap?
I was a kid. What I know we used to do, because the one thing about racism people don't understand, or the division of colors, up here as a kid, I remember 2 things that stood out with me as I grew up.
Okay.
One, color struck. Light-skinned blacks always thought they were better.
I've heard that a long time ago.
That's a fact. I felt it. Always. And when they would come up, we were locals. And they would look at us if we were supposed to wait on them. You know, like, get them this or get them that. Even as little kids, they wouldn't say, honey, would you mind? I need this. Go get this for me.
Yeah.
Or
like a demanding.
Yeah, like a demanding. It was. And I remember that as a child. The separation up here. Even with that, but I remember those are things, and we used to walk down the railroad tracks, and they used to have fresh strawberries, wild strawberries. We'd eat those, but we used to have to, we had coal stoves up there.
Okay.
And here's the thing, Pastor.
Go ahead.
We never got burned by that big coal stove in the living room. You were so trained not to touch this, not to touch that. But we'd have to go out late in the evening and gather up coal in buckets.
Okay.
And bring it back to keep the stove heated.
Wow. Coal. Now, where did you get the coal from?
Off the railroad tracks.
Okay.
Because there were trains that came through when I was a kid.
Okay.
And they would drop coal because that's how they heated their, the trains.
And you would go pick that up?
Yes. We'd pick up buckets full and we'd bring them back home.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's how we heated up everything.
What about schools? Now, you went to school out here?
Yeah, Yates School right there on 10.
Okay.
Not on 10, I'm sorry. On
Broadway?
No, the main
Okay, you got
on Baldwin Road.
Okay, Baldwin. Yeah.
That was
Okay.
Yates. It turned out being I think they had this a library and all.
Is the library still there now?
Okay, that was our first school.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
Yates School, and it went from kindergarten to 6th grade.
Okay.
And boy, when you walked up them steps from the main floor, you thought you was something. 'Cause you moved.
You graduated.
You had graduated. They also had a little school in the back, a little white building. I think that might have been, if it was before you became bad enough to go to kindergarten. They had a little thing back there. And I remember the fire department, it's like if they had a fire or something, they also used that area back there to get everybody together to go to, to work, the volunteers to work for the fire.
Okay.
But those are the kind of things that I remember us doing as kids.
Yes.
Up here. There wasn't, I mean, we never realized there wasn't anything to do because to us, that was everything.
Was it any busing or anything? Or did you walk to school mostly or get driven to school? Or how's that?
No, you walked. And
Okay, you walked.
Yeah, me being so short, they would make a way for me through the snow.
Yeah.
So I could walk through the snow. That's how we did that. But they were so prejudiced. My uncles went to Baldwin School in Baldwin,
Okay.
Baldwin High. And my mother was telling me that they were so racist, they would have to walk 3 miles to school because no one would pick them up. And finally, I guess the coach felt sorry for them and would come get them and take them, to baseball, football practice and basketball and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you left Idlewild, you mean when that was done, because this was like a grammar school or something like that, kindergarten to a certain grade, you graduated to go to Baldwin. Then it was Baldwin. Okay. And that's where you experienced whites.
I didn't know. I experienced it in Flint.
Yeah.
I never experienced racism up here because my mother, we left when I was 9.
Okay.
So I was.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I see.
So when I went to school up here, I was still, like, I guess in the 6th, 7th grade, actually, with the age group.
Yes.
Yeah. I experienced it when we moved to Flint. That's the first time I knew what racism was. I didn't know what division was. When we moved to Flint, we lived in and a lot of people don't know, but they call, I think, Jewish neighborhood the ghetto.
Okay.
All
right.
And that's where we moved. But I noticed that white people started moving out. And I didn't understand that because I'd never lived with whites. And I didn't understand why are they moving. But it's called white flight. You heard of that?
No, I've never heard of that.
Oh, white flight is when black people move in, white people move out.
No, I didn't know that.
It's called white flight.
That's probably an old term then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That goes way back. So that's the first time I experienced any separation.
Okay.
I didn't realize that, Baldwin and Idlewild was so separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because we were so close together. But what we used to do up here, when all the Idlewild people would leave, they'd leave around Labor Day.
Okay.
And we collect all the bottles the whole time they were here, and we take them to Wilson's store,
Yeah.
the yellow brick building.
Okay, yes.
That Lindsay's have now.
Yep.
Well, that was a grocery store.
It was a grocery store, okay.
Yeah, we would take all of our bottles there and cash them in for the candy.
Okay. It wasn't 10 cents at that time, though, the cans.
Oh, no, they were a penny.
Okay.
Yeah. But we learned how to swim. They throw you in the lake up here when you were in diapers almost.
And just so you can swim.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I could have. I was in Chicago and they didn't throw us in the lake.
No, they didn't.
No.
No, they didn't throw you in.
No, and I still don't know how to swim today, but that's all right.
Oh, you do it, don't?
I don't.
Oh.
No.
I tell you what, it's a good thing I learned. My sister and I almost drowned.
Okay.
Shortly after we moved to Idlewild, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah, we almost drowned, and only because we knew how to swim. My sister was a lot larger than me.
Yes.
And we were at what they call a gravel pit. You know what the gravel pit is?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
We were at a gravel pit, and she had me on her back.
Uh-huh.
And I was saying, Carol, let's don't go out so far, because you
Yeah.
know you can be right here in the gravel pit. Next thing you're over your head.
Yes.
And next thing I know, we were just going down, down, down. And I remember my whole life flashed in front of me. So it's a fact when you're close to death like that,
Yes.
that really happens. I remember my mother, I guess I had my hands around my sister's throat, and my mother turned me around
Yeah.
and said, swim, Sondra, swim.
Yeah.
And she had me towards the shore, and
Yeah.
I just started swimming.
Really?
And she was able to bring my sister in.
That's amazing.
Because she couldn't bring us both in. Yeah, how
Yeah.
can you bring 2 kids in at one time? And she left one of us out, one of us would have died. So
Okay.
she was able to turn me around, because by that time my sister was unconscious.
Uh-huh.
Self-preservation, you don't realize
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You know, I was just holding on to her, but keeping her under.
Yeah.
Because, you're lightweight in water. I don't know if you know that. It doesn't matter how much you weigh.
Yeah.
You're really very lightweight,
Yeah.
So I was able to hold her under.
Yes.
Because of weight don't make a difference when you with the water.
And you remember that. And you was able to swim. So you learned how to swim at that time.
I learned how to swim as a kid up here.
That's amazing.
But I used it later on
Yes.
in life is what I'm saying, because I knew how to swim.
Now, did you swim in the Ottawa beach much, or what did you call it, the island, or just the beach?
That's why I learned how to swim. That's why I
Okay.
tell people. That's why I was thrown in the water in diapers.
Okay.
That's how we learned to swim, right in Idlewild Lake.
Ottawa Lake. And okay, what do you remember fish places on that lake too? Fish, they call it a fish place.
Oh, you mean where they have have all the little fish?
No, what they ate, they call it Shrimp Shack or something like that. It was a restaurant like
Oh,
a
that
shrimp.
was